In the space of 4 years, Jude Bellingham has lived out real-life career mode, breaking out into his hometown club at 16, becoming a Bundesliga regular at Borussia Dortmund at 17, and then completing a €100 million transfer to Real Madrid at 20. Why has Bellingham had a start to his career that players can only dream of? Well, even back in his Birmingham days, teammates thought of him as a 28-year-old man in a 16-year-old's body. And fans have been blown away by how clearly he speaks in post-match interviews. There are no typical teenage mumbles, he handles himself like a confident man. He's undergone an acceleration of maturity, rarely seen in people of his age in general, let alone in the world of elite sport. And the reason for this is down to one simple psychological concept. This concept, along with its 4 components, is the secret sauce behind Bellingham's rapid rise, and will be at the heart of his attempts to become a future Ballon d'Or winner. And what is this concept? Let's find out. As said, despite being so young, Jude Bellingham comes across as someone 10 years older. Some people might call it just having his head screwed on, but psychologists would say that Jude Bellingham is high in emotional intelligence. And it is this concept that is at the heart of his rapid rise as a footballing star. Emotional intelligence, sometimes known as EQ, is like having a Jedi-like ability to be able to navigate the emotional roller coaster of everyday life. You're able to channel the emotions of yourself and others in ways that help you achieve both personal and team goals. It lets you have a huge influence on your surroundings and the people within those surroundings if you use it wisely. And if we look closely at Jude Bellingham's career, we'll see many incidents of where he's shown how to expertly use his EQ to his advantage. So let's think about Bellingham as a player. Despite his versatility in playing all kinds of midfield roles, he's at times shown the unique ability to control the tempo of a game, one of the hardest things in football. Think of the great conductors like Modric, Pirlo, Scholes, Xavi, Iniesta. In a game that's becoming overly stat crazy, the influence of these greats is sometimes not always fully appreciated, because throughout their careers they had a less visible ability. They all showed a deep ability in perceiving emotions, in other words being able to recognise the emotional state of the entire pitch. People high in perceiving emotions can pick up on subtle emotional cues such as facial expressions, tone of voice and body language, and can also identify different emotions accurately. And using this information, they then decide to alter the pace or intensity of the game. They will dictate on the pitch whether to slow down and just retain possession for a few minutes if they want to blunt the opposition who have had a few good chances. Or they will decide to start attempting more incisive passes if they start sniffing out a little bit of fear and panic in the opposition. The tempo controller sniffs these things out like a sniffer dog. And Bellingham, despite his versatility, showed this ability most frequently in his Dortmund days, which ultimately allowed him to win both the Bundesliga Young Player of the Year and Player of the Year during his time there. And this versatility of Bellingham also ties into the second component of EQ. You may know that prior to taking the number 5 shirt at Madrid, Bellingham wore the number 22 shirt. And there was actually an interesting reason behind this. During his time at Birmingham, he sat down with youth coach Mike Dodds, who explained that he felt Bellingham could do everything a midfielder needs to do equally well. The defensive duties of a 4, the box-to-box athleticism of an 8, and the moments of attacking genius of a 10. And when you combine those numbers, that's what gave Bellingham his famous number 22. And again, if you think about modern football, it's becoming increasingly rare to find someone who's able to do all of those things equally well. But those who can have an insane ability of using emotions to their advantage. Athletes high in IQ like Bellingham are incredibly good at harnessing their emotions to facilitate thinking, problem solving, and decision making. They're able to quickly identify which emotions are best to use depending on the situation that they find themselves in. And if you think about a number 4, a number 8, and a number 10, each of these positions has arguably a different emotional state that one needs to be in order to put in peak performances. You want your 4 to be composed to help build up play as well as aggressive to win the ball back. You want your 8 to be passionate and hyped up so they have the energy to keep bombing up and down the pitch the entire game. And you want your 10 to show signs of being clinical, but also cheeky to break the opposition lines. And Jude Bellingham is a master of using his emotions to channel each of these when placed in different positions. He also actually had to embody the emotions of being desperate and forceful in his early Real Madrid days, where he showed traits of a number 9 in scoring 5 goals in his first 4 games, most of which were typical scrappy poacher goals you'd expect from a striker. He's an emotional chameleon, and that's why it's so easy for him to adapt to the role that he's placed in, even if that changes frequently throughout a season, or sometimes even within games. And then when it comes to the third component of emotional intelligence, the most telling sign of this one came on the 22nd of September 2022, when Jude Bellingham led out Borussia Dortmund to become their youngest captain in history at just 19 years old. Even back in his Birmingham days, Bellingham took his teammates by surprise at how much leadership he showed despite being just 16 years old. He would carry and present himself as someone 10 years older and was not afraid to take responsibility despite his youth. The reason for this is because people high in emotional intelligence also have a higher than average ability in understanding emotions. This typically involves a deeper level of emotional awareness and comprehension. In other words, it's all about being tuned into not just your own feelings, but also those of your teammates. And this is super important for leaders because it allows them to keep together a sense of team unity, to motivate their teammates, and to also resolve conflicts as and when they arise. This is typically something that comes with more experience, and that's why you tend to see older members of the team becoming captain. But Jude Bellingham has accelerated his understanding of emotions by being super tuned in and focused on his environment. For example, in a recent interview, his new teammate at Real Madrid, Dani Carvajal, said, "From the first moment when he started training, we looked at each other in pre-season, the veterans, and said, phew, he knows what he's doing. You don't see that he's very fast, that technically he's crazy, it's just that he's very complete. He's a finisher. You give him the ball and from the third week he's understood everyone just by watching. He's very intelligent." And the key thing here is understood everyone just by watching. What you tend to find with a lot of young players is that when they're trying to make a good impression, they're far more concerned just with themselves. So they will try too hard by doing things like trying to dribble past 5 players every time they get the ball, or trying to smash the ball as hard as they can every time they get a shot. But those high in emotional intelligence, like Bellingham, they look to understand first before contributing. They just observe rather than get involved to begin with. This allows them to understand the complex emotional dynamics of their club, which, as we've seen through loads of fly-on-the-wall documentaries like the different All or Nothings, a lot of the day-to-day running of a club is built on politics. And those high in being able to understand emotions like Bellingham are able to adjust their behaviour and approach in ways that fit those expectations. And that's why he was named as Dortmund's third-choice captain behind club legends Marco Reus and Mats Hummels whilst he was still a teenager. And the last component of emotional intelligence is best seen in the various responses that Jude Bellingham has given in post-match interviews. After his man-of-the-match performance for England against Scotland, he was asked about his fantastic start to the season, where he'd scored 6 goals in 6 games for club and country. And this was his response.
We've seen you score so many goals already for Real Madrid. Another goal tonight for England. Is this new goal scorer role one you're relishing as well?
Yeah, I think it's just a freedom role, really. I think if you look at my performances in Madrid so far, they're ones that are quite complete because I get given the freedom by the amazing teammates and coaching staff and manager that I've got. They allow me to go all over the pitch, to help him build up, to be there in the box to finish the chances and to create as well. And I think I can do all of that pretty well. I can still do it a lot better, and that's what I'm trying to prove to you all.
In this clip, we see a prime example of Bellingham managing his emotions. Just think, how many 20-year-olds would be that calm and level-headed after such an insane start to the season for arguably the biggest football club in the world? Here, Bellingham shows the very difficult skill of not getting carried away with oneself. Managing your emotions is like being the captain of your own ship. You constantly have to change course after wave of success, but also wave after wave of frustrations and disappointments. Bellingham's accelerated maturity has fueled his accelerated football development, because he has made managing his emotions one of the most important parts of his game. Doing this has meant he hasn't been overwhelmed with being thrown straight into the deep end at Real Madrid. The pressure to perform at the elite level is something that many athletes take years to handle and cope with. Too many waste their potential through a lack of being able to control their emotions, both the good and bad ones. It causes them to sulk, get complacent, or self-destruct because they cannot take criticism. But Jude Bellingham looks like a generational talent, not just because of what he can do with his feet, but also what he can do with his head. He is able to enjoy the highs and understand the importance of celebrating them, but he is also aware of the need to keep adding fuel to the fire of his ambition, to keep getting better game after game. He manages his emotions to get more out of himself and to keep working on his weaknesses so that he can really become the complete midfielder. And his overall emotional intelligence will surely be the key to help him become one of the greatest players of his generation.